Steve Martin is a funny guy who has been making people laugh for a long time. He has that silver hair and a laugh that you just can't forget. Steve Martin has been a part of American comedy for over 5 decades. He was great in The Jerk and Father of the Bride. Steve Martin is good at making people laugh with his jokes and silly antics. Lots of people love Steve Martin. What you might not know about Steve Martin is that he is very picky about his work. Steve Martin wants everything to be just right. If something is not good enough, Steve Martin can get a little upset. Martin is a guy who always seems professional and nice when people are watching. When you talk to the people he works with, like directors and other actors, they tell you that Martin is not always that nice. When he is not in front of the cameras, Martin makes a list of actors he does not like to work with. He even says no to working with them if he really does not like them. Martin keeps track of the actors he finds difficult to work with. This list is something he uses to decide who he will work with in the future, which is something that Martin does when he is away from all the attention. Number 1, Chevy Chase. People talk about the movie Three Amigos. It makes them laugh. Chevy Chase and Martin Short were really funny together in that film. People have loved Three Amigos for a long time. When they were not on screen, Martin and Chevy Chase did not get along. Martin is a careful person who likes to plan everything out. He wants to make sure the comedy is timed right. Chevy Chase is the opposite. He likes to make things up as he goes along and be a little crazy. The director of the movie, John Landis, said that Martin and Chevy Chase were like fire and ice. Martin would practice his scenes a lot. Then Chevy Chase would come in and do something totally different. This would mess up all of Martin's planning and rehearsing. The tension was really high during a difficult scene. Martin got very upset, said he would leave if Chase did not do what the script said. Even though they were nice to each other in public, the people working on the set said it often felt like a war between Martin and Chase because they had different ideas about what was funny. The set was a place to be because Martin and Chase just did not see eye to eye on comedy. Number 2, Jim Carrey. He is a mix of being wild and being in control. Martin has a thought-out way of doing comedy. Jim Carrey has a lot of energy, likes to make things up as he goes along. They met at award shows and other events for people in the comedy business. It was very clear that they are not alike. One time, at the American Comedy Awards in 1995, Jim Carrey started doing a comedy routine that he had not planned. This clearly annoyed Martin. Martin responded in a way, but you could tell he was making a point. Jim Carrey and Martin have different styles of comedy. Martin thinks comedy is like math. It has to be structured and elegant with a solution. On the hand, Carrey thinks comedy is like jazz music. It is wild. You never know what is going to happen. The two comedians, Martin and Carrey, never really fought in public. You could tell there was tension between Martin and Carrey. This tension showed that Martin and Carrey have different ideas about how to do comedy. Number 3, Bill Murray. This is because of what happened on Saturday Night Live. It was a time ago, in 1978. Bill Murray and Martin were supposed to do a sketch. Bill Murray showed up late. He did not do the routine they had planned. Instead, he just made things up as he went along. This really threw off Martin's timing. After the sketch, Martin talked to Bill Murray about what happened. He was not happy. Bill Murray just laughed about it. This made Martin very upset. For a time, Bill Murray and Martin did not talk to each other. They did not work together again for a long time. It was not until 10 years later that they worked together again. Then things were still a little awkward between Bill Murray and Martin. This clash showed that two really funny people cannot work well together when one person likes to plan things out and the other person likes to just go with it. The comedic minds in question just did not mix because one comedic mind likes structure and the other comedic mind likes spontaneity. Number 4, Steve Carell. He likes to make things up when he is acting. This happened when he was filming The Big Year. It got on Martin's nerves. Both Steve Carell and Martin are guys. They play characters who are smart but also really awkward. The thing is, Steve Carell likes to try things and say things that are not written down. He does this a lot. Martin, on the hand, likes to plan everything out. He writes down what he wants to say. then says it. Steve Carell's way of doing things did not work well with Martin's way. The people who worked with them said that Steve Carell and Martin did not hang out much when they were not filming. Steve Carell was also not in any of Martin's projects. Martin thinks that making things up when you are acting means that the writing is not good. Steve Carell thinks it is a way to make the writing better. He thinks it is a thing to do. The professional tension between these people shows that small differences in how they think about comedy can cause problems. This happens even when the performers seem similar to the public and they work in similar ways. The way they think about comedy is what matters. Comedy is a part of what they do. Martin's stories show something. He had problems with the people he worked with. It was not just because of his ego. The main reason was that they had different ideas about what comedy is. For Martin, comedy is like building something. You have to plan it and make sure everything is just right. Other people think comedy is more natural and happens on its own. They like to go with what feels right in the moment. When these two ways of thinking collided, it was hard for everyone. Sometimes it led to really funny moments on television. Even though it was tough for the people involved, it was worth it in the end. Martin's comedy is very special. People love it. Steve Martin has a list of people he found tough to work with. This list shows that comedy is not about being funny. It is also about how you think about things. Really talented people, like Steve Martin, can have a hard time working together if they do not see things the same way. Steve Martin's list is an example of this. It shows that even the best comedians can disagree when their ideas are different. Number 5. Adam Sandler. This is really interesting because it shows a difference in the kind of comedy that Steve Martin and Adam Sandler do. Steve Martin is a smart comedian who was popular in the 1970s and 1980s. He made comedy into something by combining big ideas with silly things and perfect timing. Adam Sandler, on the hand, became popular in the 1990s with his funny characters who act like kids. He often uses comedy, silly jokes about the body, and getting really angry to make people laugh. Steve Martin and Adam Sandler are just really different when it comes to comedy. Martin and this other guy never worked together. Martin did an interview in 2003. He said some things that made it sound like he does not like the kind of comedy that the other guy does. He called it noise in a wig, which is a pretty funny way to put it. When the other guy, Sandler, was thought of for a movie project, Martin said no. He said, "I think we make kinds of movies," which is a nice way of saying he does not like Sandler's comedy. For Martin, comedy is a chance to make something that means something and is smart. He thinks Sandler's way of doing comedy is not as good and is actually a step for comedy. Martin thinks comedy should be meaningful and sophisticated, and Sandler's approach is not that. Number 6. Joe Piscopo. Joe Piscopo was on Saturday Night Live. That was a time for the show. A lot of people think Saturday Night Live was not very good then. Steve Martin used to host the show when it was really good. He did not like Joe Piscopo's jokes. He thought they were not funny. The people who worked on Saturday Night Live said Steve Martin looked really upset when Joe Piscopo did his Frank Sinatra impression. Steve Martin thought this was a part of the problem. With Saturday Night Live, Joe Piscopo's comedy was just not good. The situation with Martin and the show got really bad. Martin wanted some of the comedy sketches to be changed. He did not want to host the show again until Piscopo was gone from the cast. This shows that Martin really cares about comedy. He was not upset with Piscopo because of reasons, but because Martin loves comedy and wants to see it get better, not worse. Martin wants comedy to keep moving, not get watered down. Number 7. Eddie Murphy. The star who does things his own way. Back in the 1980s, Martin's movie career was really taking off. At the time, Eddie Murphy was coming up with a completely different kind of comedy. Eddie Murphy had a lot of energy and people loved him. Even though Martin said things about Eddie Murphy, he did not want to work with him. Martin thought Eddie Murphy's movies were too dirty and used words too much. He wanted people to laugh because they thought something was clever, not just because it was dirty. On the hand, Eddie Murphy thought Martin's comedy was too smart and weird for regular people. They tried to work on a project together in the early 1990s, but it did not happen because neither Eddie Murphy nor Martin would give in. This tension showed that American comedy was changing. You had Martin's smart kind of comedy. Then, you had Murphy's, sometimes rude jokes. They were very different. Even though they both changed their styles, they never really worked together when they were first starting out. This made people wonder what it would have been like if they had teamed up. The idea of Martin and Murphy working is a really cool thing to think about. They could have been a comedy team. Steve Martin's list shows us that he really loves comedy and wants to do it right. He thinks comedy should be smart and have a structure. The actors he had trouble with were not people, but Steve Martin, and these actors did not see eye to eye on what makes comedy good. They had ideas about comedy because of their age or because they liked to improvise in different ways. Steve Martin's stories tell us that even famous comedians can disagree when they have ideas about what comedy should be. Steve Martin's experiences with these actors are an example of this. Ultimately, these stories illuminate not only Martin's exacting standards, but also the delicate balance required to create humor that resonates both on screen and off.